What's up guys, Bryant Jr. here. In this Maya video tutorial, we're going to be going over how to model a 3D button inside of Maya without using any Booleans, any texturing tricks, no opacity maps. This is 100% hardcore polygon modeling. Now this is the asset we're going to be creating here. It's a button that you'd see on a garment, clothing, sweaters, whatever. Has 4 traditional holes where the thread goes through and all that good stuff. But as you can see, not only is this particular geometry extruded and it has thickness, but the holes are 100% smooth. And if you realize, and if you actually look even closer, there aren't a lot of polygons. So how do we do that? How do you get really nice smooth circles in a geometry such as this without using Booleans, without using 1,000 polygons? Alright, I'm going to show you how. So why don't we just get started? A few disclaimer before we get started is I'm actually using Maya 2016 for this particular video tutorial. Now, once again, everything you'll learn here in this video, you will be able to apply in any earlier version of Maya. It's just a few different options are in a couple of different places. When we get to those places, I'll make sure I denote that and I'll let you guys know. But for the most part, everything is pretty much easily transferable. Alright, so without further ado, let's get started. Alright, the first thing we're going to need to do to create a button is we're going to start from some type of a primitive. The primitive we're going to use for this is going to be the cylinder. So I'm going to go up to my polygons menu and click on the cylinder geometry, and it places a cylinder in the 0 to 0 space. That's in the middle of the world. Alright, so now that we have this, and this is a disclaimer, this little pop-up box that comes up here, it's very awesome. It's a new feature of Maya 2016. I'm not going to use it simply because I don't want to confuse anyone who's using a previous version of Maya. So as awesome as it is, I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to use the traditional editing that I would normally use in earlier versions of Maya, which is over here in the channel box. So once again, with the cylinder selected, I'm going to go into my channel box and I'm going to scroll all the way down and go to my inputs. So here's my cylinder, and there's a few settings that I'm going to change. The first setting I'm going to change is the subdivision axis number. By default, it gives you 20. And for this tutorial, that's way too high. I do not need 20 sides. So I'm going to change this from 20 to 8. Awesome. So that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 sides. More than enough for what we're doing here. The only other thing I'm going to change is the subdivision's caps. I'm going to change it from 1 to 2. Easy enough. Alright, so that gives me one edge loop in the middle of the top face and one edge loop in the middle of the bottom face. Awesome. We're almost there. Not really. So the next thing we're going to do is select the bottom faces and the side faces and delete them. I'm only interested in keeping this top row of faces. In order to do that, I'm going to select the cylinder, right click on the cylinder, go to face mode, and I'm going to make a selection, marquee selection, around the side and bottom faces. Once I select them, they turn orange. That lets me know what is selected and what's not. So as you can see, the bottom faces are orange, the side faces are all orange, the top is still gray. Awesome, that's exactly what I want. Now that I have the faces that I want selected, I simply hit delete. Great. Now I'm left with just the top row of faces, which is exactly what I want. Now we can all go home. Not really. We're getting there. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is get rid of this middle row of faces here. I don't need that. So we're going to do the same thing. Marquee select the middle row and click delete. Alright, so it gives us some sort of a ring. This is great. This is exactly what we need. In this particular technique of modeling the button, we're going to start from the inside and work our way out. So in this particular case, we're going to be modeling the buttonhole, and then we're going to work our way out to the button outer geometry. So now that we have this, we're going to go into our top view by clicking on the spacebar, which brings up our 4-layer view, and I'm going to hover over the top view and click on space bar again to maximize that view. And just kind of wigged out on me a little bit there. Alright, little technical difficulties, but okay, here we go. Okay, so this is the top view, and I'm going to click on W, or I can click on my move tool over here. It does the same thing. And as you can see, this particular piece of geometry lives within 4 grid spaces. So it's 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is great. Even numbers are always good to work with. But instead of it being in the dead center, I'm going to move this up and to the right. That puts it in 1, 2, 3, 4. These 4 spaces. Now I'm going to zoom in really close here so that I can make sure that I'm getting this as centered as I possibly can. And I don't know why it keeps doing that, but alright, let's go. Move it over. So I'm going to basically move my gizmo so that the red arrow is on the horizontal axis and the yellow arrow is on my vertical axis. So now that's great. That's pretty much in the middle, or close enough. Alright, so now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create an edge loop in the dead center of this piece of geometry all the way around. And in order to do that, that's going to be the one thing that's a little bit different in Maya 2016. In earlier versions of Maya, you would go up to the menu of Edit Mesh and go to Insert Edge Loop. As you can see in Maya 2016, there is no Insert Edge Loop here. They've moved it and created a new menu called Mesh Tools. So if I go to Mesh Tools, I'll find the Insert Edge Loop. So I'm going to actually go to the options by clicking on this little box to the right of it. Pulls up my options menu on the left side. If I reset my tool, this is what you would normally get when you click on Insert Edge Loop. So I want to create one edge loop in the middle of all of these faces without having any of them be unequal. So what I need to do in this case is select this multiple edge loop options, and by default it gives you 2. We only need 1. Now when I click on any of these lines that are going out, like the spokes, it's going to put an edge loop in the very center. I'm going to undo this just to show you for an example. It doesn't matter where I start this, so I can be really low on this particular line, and if I click it, it's going to put it in the middle. This is why we changed this setting. It basically is foolproof, so there's nothing that you can do that's going to make this edge loop unequal. Great. Now that we have that, we can click on the W key and go to right. We can right click and go to object mode. That's going to get us out of that tool. And now if you notice, this piece of geometry is butting right up next to this vertical line. To me, that's way too close for comfort. If we're creating 4 buttonholes, we don't need for the buttons to be touching, the buttonholes to be touching. So we're going to select this outer row of faces that we've just created by using the Insert Edge Loop tool, and we're going to delete it. In order to select an entire edge loop, we will right click and go to Face Mode, click on one face, hold down our Shift key, and double click on the next face. It's going to select the entire ring. Once again, it makes it orange to let us know that it is what's highlighted, and if I click delete, it gets rid of it. Awesome. So now I have my buttonhole and I have a lot of space. The reason why I need this space is because now we're going to duplicate this to create 4 buttonholes. Okay. In order to do that, the first thing I need to do is to move my pivot point from the center of the actual piece of geometry to the center of the world. Now there's a lot of ways we can do this. We can click on Insert this way, and it allows us to click on insert and move our pivot point this way. But the truth is, there's a very much easier way to do this, and that easier way is to simply group this. So if I click Control G, it groups it. But the group is not what I'm after. What I am after is the exact accurate location of the pivot point being at the 0 to 0 space in the world. That is what I'm after. Great. So now that I have this at the 0 to 0 space, and if you click off of it and you click on it again, and if you notice that your pivot sort of snaps back into its original position, simply click on the up arrow on your keyboard and it selects the group mode, which, since we've adjusted our pivot point for the group mode, it takes it back to the 0 to 0 world space. Just in case you do that and you don't know why your pivot point moved and you want to get it back to the center of the space. Awesome. Now that I have this pivot point in the space that I want it, now we can start to duplicate it. I'm going to go up to our edit menu. I'm going to go to duplicate special and click on the options box. Now that we're here, I'm going to reset my settings just so that we're all on the same page. Slide this over a bit. And now I'm going to scale this as I duplicate it in the negative X axes. Now, why am I doing this? So a little bit of 3D fundamentals here. So your red arrow here, as well as your little view origin axis down at the bottom, lets you know which axis is which. So red is going horizontally from left to right, our Y is going up and down, and our Z is going back and forward. So in this case, we're going to be mirroring our piece of geometry from right to left, which is going horizontally, which means it's red, which means it's X. So we're going to be duplicating this along the X axis. So in order to do that, we come into our duplicate special options box, and we have our scale attribute that we can adjust. Now, anytime you see in Maya three numerical attributes, it's pretty safe to say the first one is going to be X, the middle one is Y, and the last one is Z. So once again, we're duplicating this geometry on the X axis, which is on the red axis right to left. That means this X is the value we're going to adjust at this point. To mirror this on the opposite side, we're simply going to make this a -1. Alright, so now that we have this as a -1, and if we click apply, it does exactly what we wanted it to do. Alright, so now that we have this piece of geometry where it needs to be, which is exactly opposite of what this piece of geometry is, we can now start to duplicate these in the vertical position. In order to do that, we're going to use the same technique. So we're going to click on this piece of geometry, click our up arrow so that we're in our group mode, so that our axis is in the center of origin. But this time, instead of scaling it in the X axis, we need to be scaling it in the axis that goes vertically, since we're going to go from up to down. Now, if we look at the axis, it's blue, and if we go down to this view origin gizmo, it lets us know that the blue is Z. Once again, based on what we've learned before, this is X, Y, and Z. So in order to duplicate this in a vertical fashion, we need to adjust the Z axis. In order to do that, we're going to go into our X, Y, and Z and change this one from 1 to -1. Hit enter and click apply. So now we have 3 buttonholes. One more to go and we're almost there. So we're going to do the same thing here. Click on this piece of geometry, click on the up arrow on your keyboard. It basically puts our pivot back in the center, and this is also going to be duplicated in the vertical axis, which is Z, so we don't need to make any changes since this is already -1 in the Z scale, and click apply. Great, we now have 4 buttonholes. Alright, now I'm going to click on this piece of geometry, and we can delete this now. Get rid of that. I'm going to click on this piece of geometry, and if you notice here, it has translation, it has our negative x's that we put there. We don't want that anymore. So what we're going to do is go to modify and freeze our transformations. Now you can see everything is 0. When we're working with geometry, especially geometry that's as precise as this, we always want to make sure we're working with zeros. Alright, so now we're going to go to this and do the same thing. We're going to go to modify, freeze transformations. Click on this one, modify, freeze transformations. This one, and instead of doing the same thing, because this gets old really fast, clicking on the geometry, going up to modify, freeze transformations, I'm going to click on this and click my G key. It zeroes this out again because G in Maya is a hotkey for repeat the last used command, which in this case was freeze transformations. Awesome. So now we have 4 buttonholes. If I go to smooth mesh preview on one of these, you'll see that I have a very nice circular piece of geometry when it's smoothed. Alright, so now we need to, so we're almost there, but something is off. So if I click on this piece of geometry and move it, you realize all of these pieces of geometry are still separate. So what we need to do is combine them all so that they're one unit. So I'm going to click on every piece of geometry here, and I'm going to go to mesh and click on combine. Now if I click on any of these pieces of geometry and move it, they all go. So now this is one unified piece of geometry, which is exactly what we want. Great. Now that we have this, we're going to actually connect them all. And by connecting them, I mean bridging these faces. So even though they're moving as one unit, they're still somewhat separate in that there's very big gaps in between the faces. We're going to clean that up in this stage. So I'm going to click on the piece of geometry. I'm going to right click on edge, and we're going to click on one edge and click on the adjacent edge here. Now in order to bridge this, we're going to go to our edit mesh and go to bridge options, which is this box over here. Alright, so by default, and I just reset my settings here so that I'm getting what you would get. So by default, your bridge settings are going to give you 5 divisions. The number of divisions is going to be the number of edges that exist in this face that we're about to create. For example, if I click apply, it not only connects these 2 edges, but it gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges in between, which is really cool in a lot of cases. However, in this particular case, we only need 1 edge. So I'm going to bring my division down to 1 and click on that. Actually, I don't need any edges here. I'm going to click on 0 and click apply. Click on this edge, the adjacent edge, and apply. Okay, so now these 2 pieces are connected. I'm going to click on this edge, and instead of hitting apply, remember our G command. Our G will repeat, the G key on the keyboard will repeat your last used command. In this case, bridge. So click on G. Alright, now we have that. We're going to start connecting these 2 pieces of geometry. Same concept. Click on this guy, the adjacent edge, and G to bridge. This guy, adjacent edge, G. This guy, adjacent edge, G. Now we're going to connect these two. And I'm basically doing the same thing that we've been doing. Notice I'm leaving the middle alone. I'll come back to this in just a moment. But for now, let's continue connecting the edges that we've been connecting. Awesome. Alright, so now this middle edge, we're going to literally select this edge, and connect that. Alright, so if we go into our object mode and select it, and go in our preview smooth mesh, now we see we have a really nice smooth piece of geometry. Really awesome, right? Cool. So if we go back to our perspective view, we'll see that this is pretty nice. I mean, really good edge flow. All right, so we're gonna go to our click on the move tool, W, and we are now going to center our pivot point. So I'm going to go to modify, center pivot. All right, now we're going to move this back down to the middle of the world space. Awesome. That is great. Okay, now that we have our buttonholes done, and I'll click on the X to get out of our bridge options mode. Now that we have this piece of geometry is basically almost done. The only thing we need to do now is add an edge loop here and an edge loop here. So one vertical and one horizontal. In order to add an edge loop, we're going to go up to our mesh tools. This is the one instance where Maya 2016 is different from the previous versions of Maya. In the previous versions of Maya, you would go to Edit Mesh and click on Insert Edge Tool. So if you are using Maya 2014 or 2012 or 2015 or 2013, you would go to Insert Mesh, Edit Mesh, Insert Edge Loop. In Maya 2016, they've added a new menu called Mesh Tools. This is where you find the Insert Edit Edge Loop. We're going to click on the options for this. So if you're in a previous version of Maya, don't click on this, click on the options box beside it. And what this does is it brings up, it not only activates the Insert Edge Loop tool, but it also brings up the options box to the left of it. Alright, so what I want to do at this point is create one edge loop in the very center of all of these faces. Like, I don't want it to be jagged. I don't want to have to try to clean it up later. I want it to be exactly in the middle of all of these edges vertically and in the middle of all of these faces horizontally. In order to do that, I'm going to click on multiple edge loop here and change our number of edge loops from 2 to 1, since I only want one edge loop. So now I click on any line there to create a vertical edge loop, and click on a vertical edge loop to create a horizontal edge loop. That's it. Our buttonhole geometry is now done. This is good to go. If we click on smooth mesh, this is what we get. Glorious. Awesome. I'm going to put this on its own layer and hide it so that we can start to work with our outer piece of geometry. And by doing that, I can come over here and click on the create a new layer and assign selected objects. That's after I have the piece of geometry selected. So I click on this button. It places it on its layer here that I'm going to name by right clicking on this guy here. It brings up my options box, and I'm going to change this to button holes layer. And save. Now when I click on this V, it hides it, and when I click on it again, it makes it visible. Awesome. So I'm gonna hide it so that we can start with our outer button geometry. We're gonna do a lot of the same things that we've done before, so this should be familiar to you. I'm going to click on a cylinder again. It puts it in the middle of the world space. I'm going to click on spacebar to go to my 4 layer out view. Click on spacebar again as I'm hovering in the perspective view, and it's going to maximize this view. Alright, so now I'm going to use the same settings that we've used before. So our subdivision axis, we're going to change from 20 to 8. And our subdivision caps, we're going to change from 1 to 2. Same thing we're going to do before. Select our right click and select the faces and delete. Here, select these interfaces, delete. So literally the exact same thing that we've done. Alright, now the only thing we need to do at this point is bring this piece of geometry from floating in the middle of the air down to here. So we're going to center our pivot again by going to modify, center pivot, and then literally just dragging it down. Alright, and for this I want to go to my side view. I'm just spacebar, using the spacebar here. And we're going to sort of get this as close as we possibly can. Zooming in really close here. Alright, and that's good. Alright, zoom out. Awesome. Now I'm going to put this on its own layer as I did with the buttonholes. Click as it's selected, click on this guy here. It's going to create a layer and assign it to this layer. I'm going to click on this guy here. It's going to bring up my edit layer options. I'm going to name this button outer layer and save. So now I also have control of that. The only reason why I'm going to hide this for now is I also want to make sure the buttonholes are also flush with the ground axis, and it wasn't, so I'm glad I did this. So we're going to zoom in really close, bring it down all the way down, zoom in a little closer and bring it down some more, and about right there, down a little bit. There we go. Alright, so now they're both in the same vicinity of one another. Now we are going to go back to our top view by clicking on spacebar, and then coming over here and clicking on spacebar again. For this particular section, we're going to actually change our shading mode to wireframe. In order to do that, we're going to go to shading, and instead of smooth shade all, we're going to go to wireframe. So now we're only looking at the lines. So once we have this, we're going to bring back our outer button layer here and select it. Alright, now we need to scale this up. So we're going to click on it and go to our scale tool, and clicking on the middle yellow box, we're going to scale this up until it's completely encompassing the buttonholes. And it can be pretty close, but it just does not need to be intersecting. So, great. Beautiful. Alright, so now I can go from our shading mode. Actually, we'll leave it into wireframe for now. So now what I need to do is connect these two pieces so that they're one piece of geometry. So once I have the outer button geometry selected, I click on the buttonhole geometry, and we're going to go to mesh and combine. Now everything is one piece. Great. Now actually I'm going to back up one. I'm going to undo that. As you can see, most of these lines, like this line here, is congruent with this line. This vertical line is congruent with this vertical line. So everything's lining up, but there's this one edge here that doesn't have an edge in the middle. So what I'm going to do is smooth this outer piece of geometry to give me more faces or more edge loops in those places that I'm missing. So I'm going to select the outer button geometry and go to mesh, smooth. So now as you can see, I have another row of faces in between the faces that were there originally. Now I want to combine these two pieces of geometry. So I select the outer button geometry and the buttonhole geometry and go to Mesh, Combine. Great. Now we're going to start to connect these vertices so that they're all one piece. By doing that, we can go click on the right. You're going to right click on the mouse button and go to vertex mode. We're going to drag a selection around these two vertices and go to Edit Mesh, Merge to Center. And that's going to basically average out the distance between those 2 points and put it in the center. We're going to select these two vertices and do the same thing. Edit Mesh, Merge to Center. These two guys, Edit Mesh, Merge to Center. These two guys, and at this point we're going to start using our G key to repeat that last command. So this guy, G. This guy, merge to center. These guys, merge to center. These guys, merge to center. And we're going to do this all the way around our button. Awesome. Now I can sort of straighten this out a little bit by selecting these pieces, these vertices rather, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to get my scale tool and I'm going to scale these out just a little bit, just to sort of give it a nicer shape. Great. Let's scale it in just a hair. Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to spacebar and go back to my perspective view, click on the object mode, and this is what we have. If I smooth this, now you will see it's taken a while to get here, but what we have, and I'll get rid of my grids now, is an amazing, lovely piece of geometry here. Alright, the last part is very, very simple. It's just a matter of extruding this entire piece of geometry. So we're going to click on it, go to Edit Mesh, and extrude. We're going to change our thickness here to, we're going to do 0.05, or let's see, do point. We'll do 0.25, 0.2. Awesome. Okay. Well, that looks, go to backwards, going. Okay. Yeah, that's good. All right. Now we have some thickness here. Now we just need to add the outer ridge that buttons usually have. So I'm going to get out of the smooth mesh preview. I'm going to go to our faces mode, click on one, double click on the next one next to it. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, click with shift, select one, and double click on that. So now I have this row of faces selected and this row of faces selected. Now I'm going to go to, I'm going to right click to bring up my hotbox, and I'm going to go to Edit Mesh and Extrude. Now this thickness I'm going to bring up to about 0.3. I'm going to go into Smooth Mesh Preview to see how that looks, and that looks pretty good to me. Yep, we're going to go with 0.3. Alright, go back to object mode and get out of mesh preview, and we're just going to add a couple of edge loops here. So now we're going to go to our mesh tools, or if you're in an earlier version of Maya, you go to Edit Mesh and insert edge loop. But for 2016, you go to Mesh Tools, insert edge loop options. I want to reset this because now I don't want for it to be in the middle. I want to be able to place it where I want it to be. So now I can actually move it around. This is what I want. I'm going to place a holding edge here and another edge there. If I do a mesh preview, mesh smooth preview, you can see now it gives me this really nice crease along that edge. I'm going to add another holding edge about right there. That's going to give me a really nice edge on that. And the same thing on the bottom. So one there, one there, one there. And now we're almost there. So the buttonholes, I'm also going to create edge loops. But see how it will take me forever, and I only have 4, but if I had a lot, it would just be very unproductive to do it this way. So now I'll go back and add multiple edge loops, change this to 2, and now I'm going to just simply click on one, and it's going to put 2 with one click. How about that? And click on W and go into object mode, and this is what we have. Took us a really long time to get here. Well, kind of a long time. I wouldn't say really long, but it took us a while to get here. But we have something that's going to render beautifully every single time. We didn't use any Booleans. We didn't use any tricks. We haven't even textured it yet. And the beautiful part about this is once we texture it, it's going to be even better because the textures are going to be following this really, really nice edge flow. So it's going to make it easier to paint if you wanted to paint it. So I hope you guys have followed me. I hope you guys have gotten something similar. Doesn't have to be exactly the same, but I hope you understand the fundamental concepts that we've used here, and I hope that now you're able to create complex pieces of geometry without having to, you know, use Booleans or fake it with bump maps, or not bump maps, but opacity maps or sculpting. I mean, this is the traditional way of doing it that is tried and true, and it makes us all better modelers. So with that, once again, my name is Rob Bryant. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Have any questions, concerns, please feel free to comment below on the YouTube channel and let me know what you would like to see next, and I'll try to put another video together for you guys. So without further ado, you guys go forth and make great 3D stuffs. Peace.